Ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the truth. Your life will never reach its highest potential until you master one thing: communication under pressure. Here's the deal. You are always one conversation away from your next breakthrough or your next breakdown. And the people who test your patience, your boundaries, your peace, they are not your obstacles. They are your training ground. They are the gym for your emotional strength. If you want an easy life, avoid difficult people. But if you want a powerful life, learn to face them head on. Let me tell you something powerful. Nobody controls your response but you. When someone lashes out, manipulates, criticizes, or tries to drag you into chaos, they are revealing themselves, not controlling you. But too often we hand over our power like it's nothing. We match fire with fire, or worse, we shut down, we retreat, and we lose ground we were born to own. You want to be unshakable. You want to be respected. You want to lead in your business, your relationships, your community. Then don't just react, strategize. Don't just talk, connect. Don't just confront, elevate. Because behind every difficult person is a hurting story. Behind every manipulator is a fear of losing control. Behind every ego is insecurity begging not to be exposed. And when you can see that, not to excuse their behavior, but to understand their power source, you win. You're no longer playing defense. You're leading the dance. So how do you talk to difficult people? Stay grounded. Breathe. Stand tall. Speak slow. Emotion loves speed, but power lives in presence. Don't mirror their chaos. Interrupt the pattern. If they yell, lower your voice. If they lie, stick to facts. If they try to guilt you, stand in your truth. Set boundaries like you mean it, not from anger, but from clarity. This is what I allow. This is what I won't. Simple, firm, non-negotiable. Seek to influence, not win. Difficult people are often addicted to control. If you try to beat them at their own game, you lose. But if you lead the energy, you change the game entirely. This isn't just about conflict management. This is about life mastery. Now listen to me, really listen. You have been giving too much of your energy to people who don't deserve it. You've let too many moods dictate your day. You've sacrificed your peace to manage someone else's chaos. That ends today. Because your life, your vision, your purpose is too important to be hijacked by difficult people. You are not here to be reactive. You are here to be transformative. So here's your call to action. Step into the fire. Face the hard conversations. Seat with power, not panic. Be the calm in their storm. And above all, be the leader in every room, every moment, every word. The world doesn't need more silence. It needs your strength. Now go out there and talk to the people you've been avoiding. Not to win, but to grow. Not to fight, but to lead. Not to survive, but to evolve. Because difficult people aren't your enemy. They're your invitation to rise. Let's go. Every moment of your life is shaped by how you respond. When you understand this at a deep, fundamental level, you unlock a power inside you that changes everything. The most crucial thing you can grasp is that your response to any situation, any person, any challenge is entirely within your control. No one else holds the key to how you feel or act unless you hand it to them. Think about it when someone challenges you, when someone tests your patience, when they come at you with negativity or aggression, they are trying to provoke a reaction. The world around you will always throw obstacles in your way, but your true power lies not in the situation itself, but in how you handle it. This is where most people fall short. They react instead of respond. They let their emotions take control of the moment. They surrender to the impulses of frustration, anger, or fear. But when you understand that your response is your choice, you free yourself from being a slave to these emotions. You become the creator of your experience instead of a victim of your circumstance. Emotions love speed. When we feel threatened, when we feel judged, we react instinctively, quickly. There's a knee-jerk reaction. But in that space, we often lose ourselves. We say things we don't mean, act in ways we regret, and create consequences we never intended. The moment you allow yourself to pause, you give yourself the time to choose how to respond. Imagine this: someone cuts you off in traffic. Your first instinct might be to speed up, honk the horn, or curse them out. It's easy, it's natural. But when you pause, when you choose not to react instantly, you gain control. Instead of letting anger take the wheel, you decide to remain calm. Maybe you breathe deeply, maybe you laugh it off. And in doing so, you not only maintain your peace, but you've also just strengthened your ability to respond wisely in future situations. That's the power of controlling your response. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about giving yourself the freedom to choose the kind of person you want to be in any situation. Same principle applies when you are facing difficult people. They might provoke you, try to manipulate you, or come at you with hostility. It's easy to respond defensively, to mirror their aggression, to get caught up in their emotional chaos. But if you can stand your ground, breathe, and choose how you want to react, you start to change the dynamic. It's no longer about them. It's about you. When you decide to respond from a place of clarity and intention rather than reaction, you empower yourself. The truth is, how you handle the situation has more to do with your character than anything the other person is doing. In every interaction, you are showing the world who you are, not by what they say or do, but by how you choose to show up. This is where you begin to shift the power balance. People are conditioned to expect a certain response, a snap, a reflexive defense, or a flight response. When you break that pattern by staying grounded, composed, and in control of your reactions, you disarm them. But this requires you to be fully present in the moment, not reacting to a past experience or future fear. It's about releasing judgment and staying focused on what you can control yourself. The more you practice this, the more automatic it becomes. The more you can choose to respond with calmness and intention, the more natural it becomes to stay in control, even when the world around you seems to spiral. The key here is to recognize that you are the one who gives away your power when you react impulsively. When you let a difficult person provoke you into frustration, you are surrendering your control. When you allow yourself to be drawn into a heated argument, you are giving away your peace. The most powerful people on this planet are not those who react the quickest, but those who respond the wisest. They don't let other people's chaos dictate their emotional state. Instead, they become the stillness in the storm. They decide how they will behave in every moment. This is not about being passive or avoiding conflict. It's about being intentional and choosing your response with clarity. It's about deciding who you want to be rather than letting the world dictate it for you. Imagine someone in your life is trying to provoke you. What would happen if you didn't react the way they expected? What would happen if you chose to stay calm, collected, and open to the possibility of a more productive conversation? The more you practice this mindset, the more you will see that your entire life begins to shift. People will treat you differently because they will no longer be able to push your buttons. Situations will become less stressful because you won't feel like you're constantly on edge waiting for the next emotional landmine. And most importantly, you will have more peace because you no longer be giving your power away to those who try to manipulate or provoke you. In those moments when you feel your emotions rise, when you feel the pressure mounting, take a deep breath. Remember that you hold the power. You control how you respond. And when you respond with intention, with calmness, with clarity, you will begin to see the world around you transform. Not because the world changed, but because you changed the way you interact with it. Every time you choose to respond from a place of strength, you become more powerful. And the more you do this, the less you will be bothered by difficult people, difficult situations, and difficult emotions. You won't be reactive. You'll be the one setting the tone. And that is the power that makes all the difference. Difficult people are not here to break you. They are here to build you. This mindset shift is one of the most empowering realizations you can have in life. When you see every challenging person, every difficult situation, and every uncomfortable interaction as an opportunity for growth, you begin to harness the true potential within you. You are not merely enduring these encounters, you are using them as stepping stones toward becoming a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. Life is filled with challenges, and no one is exempt from them. There will always be people who test your patience, your emotional boundaries, and your ability to stay composed. These individuals are not random occurrences. They are deliberate, designed experiences, tests that will either make you crumble or push you toward greatness. The choice is always yours. Consider the concept of emotional fitness. Just as physical fitness requires intentional effort, discipline, and training, emotional fitness requires you to actively work on your emotional intelligence, resilience, and self-awareness. Difficult people are your training partners in this journey. Every time someone pushes your buttons, it's an opportunity for you to strengthen your emotional muscles. Every time you remain calm and composed in the face of negativity, you are building your emotional resilience, making it easier to handle future challenges. Think about a muscle. It only grows stronger when it faces resistance. The more weight you lift, the more your muscles adapt and grow. Likewise, the more you encounter difficult people and situations, the more you are forced to develop emotional flexibility. You cannot grow in comfort. Growth only happens when you stretch yourself beyond your current limits. And those limits are often defined by how you respond to the difficult individuals in your life. When you approach these interactions with the mindset that they are not obstacles, but opportunities for growth, you change the dynamic. Instead of feeling victimized by difficult people, you begin to feel empowered by them. You start to view them as your teachers, your sparring partners in the fight for emotional strength. And as you learn to manage your reactions and responses, you become more adept at handling not only those difficult people, but any challenging circumstance that life throws at you. Every time you manage a situation with grace, every time you choose to respond with patience and understanding, you are strengthening the core of who you are. This doesn't mean you allow others to walk over you. It doesn't mean you accept disrespect or mistreatment. It simply means that you rise above their behavior, not because you're better than them, but because you are committed to preserving your own peace and integrity. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do when dealing with difficult people is to refuse to engage in the same level of drama. They may try to escalate things, pull you into an argument, or stir up conflict. But if you remain calm, composed, and centered, you change the game entirely. The more you practice this, the more second nature it becomes. You become unshakable. Your energy is no longer dependent on the chaos they bring into the room. Instead, you lead the energy. You are no longer responding to their negativity. You are influencing the conversation and the entire dynamic of the interaction. What's even more profound is that by mastering this, you create a ripple effect. People start to notice. Those around you begin to see that you are different, that you don't engage in drama or petty conflicts. You set the tone for the kind of conversations you want to have. Your calmness and maturity create a sense of stability and security in any situation, which in turn encourages others to rise to your level. This doesn't mean you should tolerate toxic behavior or become a doormat. It means you refuse to let anyone dictate your emotional state. You stay in your power. You respond from a place of choice, not reaction. This is the highest level of emotional mastery. You no longer allow other people to control your peace. And in doing so, you start to control the room. Moreover, each difficult person you encounter becomes an opportunity to deepen your empathy. You begin to see them as people, not as villains. Everyone has a story. Everyone has pain, fears, insecurities, and experiences that shape the way they act. When you adopt this mindset, you no longer view them as obstacles, but as people who are just like you, navigating the complexities of life. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior. It simply helps you to detach from it. You can remain compassionate without absorbing their negativity. You can maintain your boundaries without getting caught in their drama. The shift in perspective allows you to approach difficult people with a level of emotional intelligence that most will never achieve. You stop taking things personally. You stop reacting out of ego. You no longer feel threatened by their behavior because you understand that their actions reflect their struggles, not your worth. As you continue to practice this approach, you will notice something incredible. Your relationships start to improve. Not necessarily because the difficult people change, but because you change. You begin to communicate more effectively, with more clarity and confidence. Your ability to stay grounded in the face of adversity becomes a powerful tool for connection. People start to respect you for your emotional maturity and strength. You may even find that the most difficult people in your life start to soften, realizing that they can no longer manipulate or provoke you. In the end, difficult people are simply mirrors reflecting parts of you that need growth. They challenge you to become more patient, more resilient, more compassionate, and more self-aware. They force you to confront your own limits and push through them. They are your personal growth accelerators, shaping you into a more powerful version of yourself. And when you view them through this lens, they are no longer your enemy. They are your greatest teachers. So instead of avoiding difficult people, embrace them. See them for what they truly are. Opportunities in disguise guiding you toward becoming the best version of yourself. And every time you face one of these challenges with grace and emotional control, you get one step closer to mastering the art of communication, the art of life itself. When you're dealing with difficult people, one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal is the ability to lead the energy in the room. Don't mirror their chaos. Lead it. This may sound simple, but it is an art that requires practice, awareness, and emotional maturity. In most situations, when we encounter a difficult person, our natural instinct is to match their energy, whether that's with anger, defensiveness, frustration, or impatience. This reflexive reaction often escalates the tension, making it harder to get to a resolution. But what if you could break the cycle? What if you could stand as the calm center in the storm, unaffected by their behavior, and redirect the energy towards something more constructive? It's human nature to reflect the emotions around us. If someone raises their voice, our instinct is often to raise ours in return. If someone attacks us, we defend ourselves, sometimes even attacking back. But this doesn't help us solve the problem, it only amplifies the conflict. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. It might feel good in the moment to match their intensity, but it only makes things worse in the long run. If you want to truly lead the conversation to transform conflict into opportunity, you must learn to control your energy. The first step in leading the energy is to recognize that you don't have to react to their energy. You don't have to mirror their aggression, frustration, or hostility. Instead, you can choose to bring a different energy into the space. For example, if someone is speaking in an elevated, tense tone, you can respond by speaking more slowly and calmly without mirroring their urgency. When you respond with calmness, you set the tone for the entire interaction. The other person may not immediately change their approach, but over time they will begin to match your composure. By controlling your own energy, you influence the direction of the conversation and the emotional temperature of the situation. This doesn't mean suppressing your own feelings or becoming passive. It doesn't mean allowing someone to walk all over you or ignoring the fact that they are being difficult. It simply means that you don't let their emotional state dictate yours. Instead of reacting to their emotions, you respond from a place of emotional intelligence, taking the lead with calmness, confidence, and clarity. The power of leading energy comes from your ability to remain in control, no matter how chaotic the other person's behavior may be. This requires self-mastery. You must be aware of your own emotional triggers and make a conscious effort to rise above them. Think of it like being a thermostat instead of a thermometer. A thermometer reacts to the temperature in the room. It goes up or down based on the external environment. A thermostat, on the other hand, regulates the temperature and sets the tone for the entire room. If you want to become the thermostat in every interaction, you must learn to regulate your own emotional state, no matter how hot or cold the environment becomes. One key to leading energy is learning to stay present in the moment. When someone is acting difficult, it can be easy to get lost in past memories of how they've treated you or to anticipate how the situation might escalate. But this type of thinking robs you of the power to lead the conversation. When you're thinking about past conflicts or worrying about future outcomes, you aren't truly engaged in the present moment. You're reacting from a place of fear or history rather than responding with strength and clarity. Being present means focusing on the conversation in front of you, not on the drama from the past or the potential for conflict in the future. It means listening to what the other person is saying without emotionally investing in their tone or accusations. This presence gives you the ability to stay grounded and respond thoughtfully, not impulsively. And when you respond thoughtfully, you not only control the energy of the conversation, but you also create space for the other person to settle down as well. Another critical aspect of leading energy is being mindful of your body language. People may not always hear your words, but they will always feel your energy. Your body language can either escalate a situation or calm it down. If someone is speaking to you with hostility and you respond by crossing your arms, clenching your fists, or rolling your eyes, you are unconsciously contributing to the tension. But if you stay open, relaxed, and calm, you signal to the other person that you are not intimidated or swayed by their energy. This physical presence reinforces your emotional control and sends a clear message that you are in charge of the interaction. It's also important to use your voice as a tool to lead the energy. The tone, pace, and volume of your voice are powerful communicators. When someone raises their voice or speaks aggressively, they are hoping to provoke a reaction from you. But when you lower your voice, speak slowly, and remain calm, you send the signal that you are not intimidated by their behavior. Your calmness can diffuse their aggression, and if done consistently, it forces them to recalibrate their own energy. People often mirror the emotional state of the person they are interacting with. If you can stay calm and composed, they are more likely to mirror your demeanor and begin to calm down as well. Leading energy doesn't mean trying to control the other person. It means controlling yourself and setting a standard for how you want to interact. By remaining centered, calm, and focused, you create an environment where the other person has no choice but to either match your energy or disengage. In either case, you are in control. The beauty of this is that it allows you to stay true to yourself without being swept away by the emotions of the moment. But this requires practice and consistency. The more you practice leading the energy, the easier it becomes. It won't always be easy, especially with people who have a strong presence or who are especially difficult to deal with. But as you continue to master the art of staying calm and controlling the energy in the room, you will find that you are less affected by difficult people and more capable of turning challenging interactions into opportunities for connection and growth. This is the essence of true leadership, the ability to remain steady and composed no matter what happens around you. One of the most essential skills you can develop when dealing with difficult people is the ability to set and maintain boundaries. Boundaries are not about building walls or isolating yourself from others. They are about establishing clear lines of what you will and will not accept. Setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. And when you set them firmly, you teach others how to treat you. The absence of boundaries is a silent invitation for people to push you past your limits. And when you allow this, you risk losing your peace, your integrity, and even your sense of self. The beauty of boundaries is that they help you remain in control, no matter what others may try to throw at you. At the core of setting boundaries is understanding that you are the authority in your own life. No one else can define your limits unless you allow them to. This is why it's so important to recognize the power you have in determining how you engage with difficult people. When you choose to establish boundaries, you take control of your emotional, physical, and mental space. You are not at the mercy of others' behavior or emotions. Instead, you are standing firm in your values, needs, and priorities. And in doing so, you create an environment in which you can thrive, even in the most challenging situations. The first step in setting boundaries is becoming aware of where you need them. Often we allow difficult people to push us around without even realizing it. Perhaps they constantly interrupt you, belittle your ideas, or invade your personal space. Maybe they demand too much of your time or energy, leaving you drained and exhausted. These are all signs that your boundaries have been violated. But the problem is not always the other person. It's that you haven't yet defined what your boundaries are, or made it clear to others that they need to respect them. Being clear on what you will and will not tolerate is crucial. Boundaries are personal and unique to each individual. What one person finds acceptable might be completely unacceptable to another. For instance, some people may be comfortable with a certain level of humor or sarcasm, while others may find it offensive. Some people may enjoy lengthy conversations, while others prefer quick, direct communication. You cannot expect others to respect your boundaries unless you first take the time to define them for yourself. Once you have identified your boundaries, it's time to communicate them clearly and assertively. The most important thing to remember when setting boundaries is that you do not need to justify them. You don't need to apologize for your needs, nor should you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. Boundaries are about protecting your well-being, and there is no reason to feel bad for doing so. For example, if someone continuously interrupts you during a conversation, you can calmly say, "I'd like to finish what I'm saying before you respond. I find it hard to concentrate when I'm interrupted." It's straightforward, respectful, and clear. The key here is to be assertive, not aggressive. Assertiveness is the ability to express your thoughts, feelings, and needs in a clear, direct, and respectful way without being passive or passive-aggressive. Aggression, on the other hand, involves demanding respect or compliance through forceful or hostile tactics, which often leads to conflict. Assertiveness allows you to express yourself in a way that promotes mutual respect and understanding. It's important to communicate your boundaries with kindness, but also with firmness. You don't need to shout or get angry, but you do need to be clear about where you stand. Once you've communicated your boundaries, it's essential to reinforce them consistently. People often test your boundaries, particularly if they're used to crossing them. This can be frustrating, but remember, the purpose of boundaries is to establish respect, not to control others. When someone pushes your boundaries, it's an opportunity for you to reaffirm them. For example, if you've told someone you need to leave work on time every day, but they continue to ask you to stay late, it's important to say, "I've made it clear that I need to leave at 5 p.m. I'm unable to stay late today." Each time you reinforce your boundaries, you are teaching others that you mean what you say and that you are serious about maintaining your limits. The more consistent you are, the less likely people will be to challenge your boundaries in the future. However, reinforcing your boundaries doesn't mean you should become rigid or unyielding. Life is full of nuance and flexibility. There will be times when you can compromise or adjust your boundaries based on the situation or the individual. The key is to do so from a place of choice. You are making a conscious decision to relax or modify your boundary because it serves your greater good, not because someone has pressured you into it. The challenge lies in discerning when it's appropriate to flex your boundaries and when it's necessary to hold firm. This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. You need to listen to your instincts and understand the situation before deciding how to respond. An important aspect of boundary setting is recognizing that not everyone will respect your boundaries, and that's okay. Some people may not be receptive to the changes you're making, especially if they've been accustomed to having free reign in your life. When this happens, it's crucial to remain firm, not in an aggressive way, but with the understanding that your boundaries are non-negotiable for your well-being. If someone continues to overstep despite your clear communication, you may need to reevaluate the relationship or find ways to protect yourself from further harm. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about taking responsibility for your own peace and happiness. One of the most profound outcomes of setting boundaries is the sense of personal empowerment it brings. When you allow others to treat you however they want, you rob yourself of your own sense of power. But when you establish and defend your boundaries, you claim that power back. You send a powerful message that your peace, your time, and your energy are valuable. You refuse to let anyone dictate how you should feel or what you should tolerate. As you continue to set and reinforce boundaries, you will find that your relationships become healthier, your stress levels decrease, and your sense of self-worth increases. Ultimately, boundaries are about self-love and self-care. They are the foundation upon which you build your relationships, your emotional health, and your peace of mind. By setting and maintaining boundaries, you are creating the space to be the best version of yourself, no matter who is around you. One of the most transformative shifts you can make when dealing with difficult people is learning how to respond rather than react. At first glance, this might seem like a subtle difference, but in practice, it is the foundation of emotional mastery and effective communication. Reactions are automatic, impulsive, and often dictated by emotions such as fear, anger, frustration, or anxiety. A response, on the other hand, comes from a place of thoughtfulness, awareness, and intentionality. The space between reaction and response is where you reclaim your power and control. It's where you can shift from being a passive participant in an emotional drama to an active creator of your own experience. Reactivity is a natural human impulse. When someone criticizes us, challenges us, or treats us unfairly, our first instinct is to defend ourselves or strike back. It's easy to get swept up in the heat of the moment. In fact, our brains are wired to respond quickly, often with a fight or flight reaction when we feel threatened. But here's the problem. When we act out of this instinctual emotional reaction, we often regret it later. We say things we don't mean. We escalate situations unnecessarily, and we make decisions based on the immediate emotional rush rather than our long-term goals or values. Reactions are driven by the need to protect the ego, the sense of self, and in many cases, our insecurities. They come from a place of fear and are usually defensive in nature. On the other hand, a response is intentional. It is the product of taking a moment to pause, to breathe, and to reflect before engaging with the situation at hand. Responding gives you the ability to create the outcome you want, rather than being swept away by the emotional tide that someone else is trying to generate. When you respond instead of react, you regain control over your actions, your emotions, and ultimately your life. The difference between reacting and responding is like the difference between throwing yourself into a raging river and navigating it with a paddle. When you respond, you direct the flow of the conversation rather than being carried away by it. A powerful tool for cultivating this ability to respond is the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness is simply the practice of staying present in the moment without judgment and without being swept away by your emotions or the stories you tell yourself about what is happening. When you practice mindfulness, you begin to notice the internal reactions that occur when someone says or does something that triggers you. You can feel the rush of emotion, whether it's anger, hurt, defensiveness, or fear. The key is not to suppress those feelings, but to observe them, acknowledge them, and then make a conscious decision about how to move forward. Say you're having a conversation with a difficult person who raises their voice at you or makes a critical remark. In that moment, your body may automatically respond with tension. Your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes shallow, and you might feel the instinctive urge to defend yourself. If you react in that moment, you're likely to engage in an emotional back and forth that only escalates the situation. However, if you can pause for just a moment and breathe deeply, you create a space between the stimulus, the other person's words, and your response. In that space, you can make a choice. You can choose to respond with calmness, with empathy, or with clear communication that de-escalates the situation. It's important to note that responding with mindfulness doesn't mean you have to remain passive or accept mistreatment. In fact, one of the most powerful ways to respond is to assert your boundaries calmly and firmly. Let's say someone criticizes you in a way that feels unjust or hurtful. Instead of immediately lashing out in defense, you could take a breath and say, I understand that you have a different perspective, but I don't appreciate being spoken to that way. Let's talk about this respectfully. You've acknowledged their feelings without abandoning your own sense of self-respect. By responding with clarity and control, you diffuse the potential for escalation and invite a more productive conversation. Responding rather than reacting also allows you to choose the tone of the conversation. Often, when we react, we match the emotional intensity of the other person. If they're angry, we get angry. If they're defensive, we become defensive. But when you respond, you take control of the emotional atmosphere. Instead of mirroring their hostility, you can respond with calmness, empathy, and thoughtfulness. This doesn't just benefit you, it also creates space for the other person to shift their behavior. When people realize that their attempts to provoke or escalate a situation don't work on you, they are less likely to continue down that path. You become a steady force, and in that steadiness, you allow others the chance to mirror your composure. This ability to respond thoughtfully also hinges on emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your emotions as well as the emotions of others. Emotional intelligence involves recognizing when your emotional buttons are being pressed and deciding whether to react or respond. It involves understanding that emotions are not facts, they are temporary states of being that can be managed. When you are emotionally intelligent, you recognize that your feelings in any given moment are your own and that you have the power to manage them rather than being controlled by them. A key element of emotional intelligence is empathy, the ability to see things from the other person's perspective. When you approach a difficult situation with empathy, you are able to listen deeply and understand the emotional needs or struggles of the other person, even if you don't agree with their point of view. Empathy allows you to respond in a way that acknowledges their feelings without losing sight of your own needs. For example, if someone is lashing out at you, rather than taking it personally, you could ask yourself, what might they be feeling? What could be driving this behavior? This doesn't excuse their actions, but it allows you to approach the situation with a greater sense of understanding. It helps you choose a response that is compassionate and effective, rather than reacting out of defensiveness or anger. One of the most profound benefits of responding rather than reacting is the level of peace it brings into your life. Reactivity creates chaos, both internally and externally. When you react impulsively, you often feel regret, guilt, or shame afterward. You may feel drained by the emotional energy of the situation. But when you respond, you create a sense of calm and control. You have a sense of clarity about who you are and how you want to handle challenges. Responding empowers you to stay grounded in your values and to navigate even the most difficult interactions with grace and dignity. Ultimately, responding rather than reacting allows you to break free from the cycle of emotional reactivity and drama that can define so many of our relationships. When you learn to pause, to breathe, and to respond thoughtfully, you create a new dynamic in every interaction. Instead of being swept away by the emotional waves of others, you become the one who charts the course, guiding the conversation toward clarity, understanding, and resolution. When you're dealing with difficult people, one of the most potent strategies you can implement is the power of listening to understand. In any challenging interaction, we often focus too much on our own thoughts, emotions, and what we're going to say next. This preoccupation with ourselves can prevent us from truly hearing the other person, which is often the key to de-escalating the situation and moving toward a resolution. Listening to understand is a practice that requires active engagement, patience, and a willingness to step outside of our own emotional state to fully absorb what the other person is communicating. At its core, listening to understand is about being present. In today's fast-paced, technology-driven world, it can be difficult to give someone your full attention. We are often distracted by thoughts about our day, the future, or our own internal narratives. But in difficult interactions, especially when emotions are running high, The ability to listen deeply can be transformative. When you truly listen to someone, you create a space for them to feel heard, validated, and respected. This is a powerful tool in resolving conflict because it shifts the dynamic from confrontation to collaboration. It signals to the other person that you care enough to understand their perspective, and this can soften their defensiveness and open the door for productive dialogue. The first step in listening to understand is to give the other person your undivided attention. In many cases, when we are faced with someone who is being difficult, our minds begin to race. We start formulating responses or counter arguments before the person has even finished speaking. This preemptive response mechanism comes from a desire to protect ourselves or to prove that we are right. But this defensive posture only limits our ability to understand what the other person is truly saying. Instead, try to quiet the inner dialogue. Focus entirely on the other person's words, tone, and body language. Eliminate distractions by putting away your phone, making eye contact, and even adjusting your posture to show that you are fully engaged. Active listening is not just about hearing the words someone says. It's about understanding the emotion and intention behind those words. Sometimes people don't express themselves as clearly as they would like, and often their emotions drive what they say. This means that listening to understand involves interpreting the emotional undertones of the conversation. For example, when someone raises their voice or becomes agitated, they might be expressing frustration, fear, or insecurity. By being attuned to these emotions, you can better understand the root cause of their behavior, which is often different from the surface level words they are using. When you pick up on these emotional cues, you can respond in a way that acknowledges their feelings and addresses the deeper issues at play, rather than getting bogged down by their specific complaints or criticisms. Another key aspect of listening to understand is practicing empathy. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see the world through their eyes. It requires openness, vulnerability, and the ability to suspend judgment. When you listen with empathy, you are not immediately labeling the other person as difficult or wrong. Instead, you are giving them the benefit of the doubt, seeking to understand their point of view. This doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say, but it does mean you are willing to consider the reasons behind their words and actions. Empathy in listening also means resisting the urge to interrupt or offer solutions before the person has fully expressed themselves. It can be tempting to jump in with advice or a rebuttal when someone is sharing their frustrations, especially if you feel like you know the right answer. However, this rush to fix the situation often leaves the other person feeling unheard or dismissed. People need to feel validated before they are ready to accept solutions. By listening patiently and allowing them to finish speaking, you create a space where they can fully express themselves, which is often half the battle in resolving conflict. Another powerful component of listening to understand is reflecting back what you have heard. This technique, known as reflective listening, involves summarizing or paraphrasing the other person's words to show that you have truly heard them. For instance, you might say, "What I hear you saying is that you're feeling frustrated because you don't feel heard in this situation." This not only demonstrates that you're actively listening, but it also gives the other person an opportunity to clarify or expand on their feelings. Reflecting back their thoughts also helps ensure that there are no misunderstandings, which is especially important when emotions are running high. It's easy to misinterpret someone's words in the heat of the moment, but by taking the time to paraphrase, you ensure that you're on the same page. Listening to understand also involves managing your own emotions. This can be particularly challenging when you're dealing with someone who is difficult or who is being openly hostile. Our natural instinct in these situations is often to protect ourselves, which can cause us to shut down or withdraw. However, if you want to truly understand the other person, you must be able to manage your own emotional responses. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, but rather acknowledging them without allowing them to take control of the conversation. By staying calm and composed, you create the emotional space necessary for both parties to communicate effectively. Another important aspect of listening to understand is asking open-ended questions. This strategy is particularly useful in situations where the other person may be upset or difficult to engage with. Rather than asking questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no, try asking questions that invite the other person to elaborate on their thoughts and feelings. For example, instead of saying, "Are you upset because of X?" you might ask, "Can you tell me more about what's been bothering you?" Open-ended questions show that you are genuinely interested in understanding the other person's perspective. and that you're not just trying to fix the problem or assert your own opinion. Listening to understand is not about agreeing with the other person or conceding to their viewpoint, but about showing respect for their experience and creating a space where both of you can engage in a productive conversation. By listening with patience, empathy, and an open mind, you create a foundation of trust and respect. This in turn makes it more likely that the other person will be open to hearing your perspective as well. In many cases, simply being heard can help diffuse a difficult situation because it addresses the emotional needs of the other person and fosters a sense of connection. Lastly, remember that listening to understand is a skill that requires practice. It's easy to get caught up in our own emotions or to feel frustrated when dealing with someone difficult. But by consistently practicing active listening, you can improve your ability to remain calm, present, and compassionate, even in the most challenging interactions. As you get better at listening to understand, you'll notice that your relationships, whether personal or professional, become more harmonious because people will feel heard, valued, and respected. And when others feel understood, they are far more likely to be open to compromise, change, or resolution.